with Ashley Avis, who is a filmmaker in the United States, is over here in Australia for a period of time, and it's been a real privilege to spend some time with her this morning. Ashley, tell us what you're doing here in Australia.
We're here in Australia documenting not only the extraordinary natural beauty of the landscape and the Brumbies, but also documenting events surrounding the Brumby Cull, which you've been such a vocal supporter of the Brumbies and keeping them on the landscapes and involving the locals in their management. And this morning was magical, getting to ride horses through the haze and the mist in this extraordinary country.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. Now, tell me, how did you get into this? Where did it start?
I grew up riding horses, and I know we talked about both of our inspiration as children, just with great equine literature. For you, the Silver and Brumby. For me, it was Black Beauty and the Black Stallion. And so I started riding horses as a kid, eventually had a career as a journalist, and then horses came back into my life when I wrote and directed Black Beauty for Disney. And then that led into a whole different avenue with advocacy and fighting to keep horses protected and working on equine issues around the world, which led me to Australia.
So you're the writer and director of Black Beauty, which came out in 2020?
2020.
And that, as you said, got you back into horses. So the connection then with wild horses, was it that people approached you, or how was it that you got interested in the issue?
Well, it was really interesting given the producers of Black Beauty wanted to modernize Anna Sewell's beloved story for people and children and families of today. And so growing up with that book, I felt such a sense of indebtedness to make sure we did it right. And so I went back to understand more about Anna Sewell's history, and I came to learn that she didn't write Black Beauty as a children's book. She wrote it because she was crippled as a young person. Horses carried her. And in the 1800s, when horses were looked at more as tools or things to help us, she understood horses so intimately and how intelligent they are and sentient, and that they can feel emotions just like us. And so in publishing Black Beauty from that first person perspective of a horse, she really helped to revolutionize our understanding of horses and animal empathy. And so I went back to honor her, to feature an issue horses were facing today. And in being tasked with setting the story in the American West, I came to understand the plight of wild horses and how our government is rounding them up, putting them into holding facilities, and really dishonoring the spirit and the history of horses, just like in Australia with your Brumbies. Mustangs helped shape our country. They fought beside us in battle. And they're such an incredible, iconic animal to have on our landscapes. And coming to Australia and falling in love, not only with the wildlife and the people, but seeing the Brumbies and the Kosciuszko, they're extraordinary and they arrest your imagination, and we have to protect that.
So the connection between horse and people, you saw that when you were obviously growing up, but you also highlighted that in Black Beauty. And tell me a little bit more about the Mustangs in the US and the fight that's been going on there and the role that you've been playing in that.
Certainly. We have wild horses across 10 Western states, at least still today we do. And so as we were working on Black Beauty, the film, I very much wanted the authenticity of seeing real wild horses in our movie. And so my husband and I went out into the American West, and we captured some of the most unbelievable images of wild horses and their families and those natural behaviors. You and I talked about earlier just how much you can learn about horses when you observe them in the wild, and those family bonds and stallions protecting their babies and the lead mare leading them to water and all of that beauty and everything.
It is a beautiful thing to watch.
It is
I mean, anyone who's watching here today, if you can see a group of wild horses and the way they behave, it is a beautiful thing to watch. And you're right, the alpha mare, she's quite a girl.
Yes. And just sitting there amongst them, whether it's by yourself or with your family, you can learn so much in a few moments about, and you and I also touched upon the need to experience that and go into the wild and experience something that you then want to protect. But the haunting echoes of what is happening in the United States with the eradication of this symbol of freedom and spirit and wildness has been something I've been working on that issue for a decade now, through storytelling, through doing talks with children in schools, getting people to write letters to Congress, lobbying Congress. And so when I learned more about what was happening with the Brumbies, it was actually through the Australian horse trainer, Cody Rossen-Harris, who worked with the horses on Black Beauty.
Yes.
And he called me about 6 weeks ago, the week that the aerial call started.
Yes.
And I hadn't talked to him in 2 years. And my phone rings and it's Cody. And I'm in Los Angeles writing a script. And I said, Cody, how are you? It's wonderful to hear from you. And he was very upset. And he said, as an Australian, as one of these leaders in the equine space, he said, I had no idea that they were shooting Brumbies from helicopters. How is this happening? Is there anything you can think of to help? And where I feel like I fit in is trying to bridge the storytelling and purpose and illuminating issues by getting people to care and emotionally attach. So I was on a plane in 36 hours with my husband after that phone call.
Wow. So that quickly.
That fast.
So, and you met him because he was the horse trainer for Black Beauty when you were filming it. And that was obviously a big job.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more then about why you felt so compelled to come over here and get involved.
The wild horses in the States are such a fixture on our landscapes. They're part of the natural tapestry, and the coexistence that you can see between wild horses and bison and all of the different creatures around, the Western US. And when I learned more about, I don't condone anything our government is doing to our wild horses. I've seen horses rounded up. I've seen families stampeded and torn apart. They separate the wild horses and put them into holding facilities in the States where, that loss of family is extremely traumatic. But we don't shoot them from helicopters. In the States, there are so many different issues where they end up getting shipped across our borders to slaughter. And we have a lot of things we have to fix in the States to protect our wild horses and our domestic horses. But the fact that this is happening in Australia and the sheer violence of culling them from helicopters.
Yes.
There is nothing humane about shooting wild horses and their families, creating a state of terror and panic. I mean, you're a horseman. Horses are flight animals. Chasing them from a helicopter at a baseline is not humane, much less the violence of that death. That has to stop.
Yeah. So you've seen some of that in the US as well. I mean, to tell us a little bit about what you've seen there. Team, you might want to just move that out of the way, that noise. Thank you.
So in the States, our government, the Bureau of Land Management, they round up wild horses using helicopters. Those helicopter contractors are paid, some of the contractors are paid millions in contracts over the years. And, the way that they do it, they're making these horses and their families run for miles. They're pushing them. The foals will run their hooves off. Stallions will break their legs trying to protect their families. And there's nothing humane about what's happening in the States with the horses. But I mean, to see them, I told you earlier, we've been into the park and we did a 4-hour hike yesterday into some of the areas, Wild Horse Plain, which, I mean, goodness, I said to my husband, wouldn't it be extraordinary to be able to come out here and camp as a tourist or a local, just to be able to be there amongst horses? But you go up there and so much of that has already been lost. And so we went out and we hiked and we found a family of horses that had been shot down. And we filmed that because it's very hard to see, but it's also, we have to find courage to look and to understand what's really happening. So
that was a group of 5 or something horses that you saw that had been shot a week or 2 ago?
Yes, there were 5 or 6 of them, and we found that we went with a very knowledgeable photographer, Kiki Schuberg, and she guided us out. And I would challenge anybody who can possibly say shooting horses is humane to go stand there like we did in front of the fallen. There was a mare with an aborted foal half out of her body.
Wow.
There's nothing humane about that.
Yes. And so the parallels with the United States, obviously, are very, very clear. I hadn't understood this. What do you think the answer is? How do we actually resolve these issues?
There needs to be transparency. And it's been incredible getting to actually speak to a lot of the locals while we've been here and to understand the local knowledge and the intimate knowledge and the relationship with the land that begins where you are. When you live with the land, you live in and amongst these creatures, you know it so intimately. And everyone I've spoken to in the 5-6 weeks we've been here now has been talking about the numbers are not accurate. And we talked about it earlier too. A jump from 4,000 or 5,000 horses in 2024 to 16,000 on a high in 2025 is biologically impossible. So putting out numbers that are false, patently false, and then asking people to believe that is assuming that people are stupid, and people aren't stupid. And so digging into that, and as a baseline, I think, just like in the States where numbers of Mustangs are inflated, there needs to be a true independent count that is factually based in the best available science, which this one factually is not. Same stuff in the States. And so once that baseline of how many Brumbies are actually in the Kosciuszko is, perhaps it might be under 1,000. Let's look at how many are actually there. From the Brumby bill that we talked about and the management plan, it seems like the land can sustain at minimum 3,000. So establish the count and then look at, like you said, returning management to some of the local communities. What does that look like? Exploring potentially fertility control, which has been done so successfully in the States.
You have seen that successfully.
Yes. Because in the States, we've been eliminating our predators, our wolves, our mountain lions that regulate wild horse populations, not everywhere, but in some areas. And fertility control has been proven to work in small populations of a few hundred horses up to over 3,000. So looking at some of those solutions, and then if horses do need to be managed and come off, there are rehoming opportunities, and working with veterans or children. There are so many other ways to do this. Aerial culling is not a solution.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. You've had the opportunity to see a lot of it, talk to a lot of the locals, talk to a lot of people who understand the issues well. What are some of your other reactions to the way the issue's been dealt with here in Australia, and particularly in comparison to the United States?
The psychological toll is something that really needs to be talked about more. And you went to the rally in Kyandra and got to feel that passion firsthand, and that sorrow and that loss, that acute loss that you can only feel if you know those horses and the land and that world more intimately, versus sitting on high and, like a Penny Sharp and Jack Goff, being able to say something is humane when you have not seen the violence and the destruction. That disconnect,
Penny Sharp being the minister and Jack Goff being the Invasive Species Council.
Continually doubling down and saying, this is humane. This is something that is the best management tool for Brumbies. No, it's not. And you need to listen to the people and the sadness that has come from the people that are there firsthand, witnessing it and hearing the helicopters buzz over their homes or their farms and hearing gunshots. That toll on the psyche of the locals is something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, there is something very special about the connection between humans and horses. I mean, it's long-standing, obviously, and I think that's something I see when I talk to people about this issue. It's very, very clear. So your documentary, you'll be finishing that off in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, well, we actually we've been cautious about announcing it, but we might as well do it here.
Oh, okay.
Which is great. I love it. This is perfect. So yes, we committed to, when we got the call from Cody, when the call started, and I walked out into the living room with my husband, and I said, I had Cody on speaker, and he said, this is what's happening. And I looked at my husband, Ed, and I said, we have to go. And, we all have supportive partners, right? And so when we came here, we weren't entirely sure what it would be. When we hit the ground, you never know when something calls to you, and you perhaps have a skill set that could help. So initially we thought we'd film, we'd give footage to the media, which we have, maybe make a 2 to 3 minute PSA to say, this is what's happening. The world needs to pay attention. And then the more that we spoke to locals, spoke to experts and lawmakers, and started understanding why this is happening, the world does need to know. So at this point, we've committed to a documentary about what's happening to the Brumbies.
Well, good on you, and thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for coming over here. And I think that parallel with the United States, I mean, learning from your experience is important. We should be doing that, but I'm particularly looking forward to seeing what you put together, and really appreciate the role that you've been playing here in Australia. And we look forward to seeing you again here.
Thank you, Angus, and thank you for your leadership and your voice and the courage to stand up for this and what is right in protecting our wild places before we lose them, which would be a travesty. We have to cherish our wild places and our connection.